Welcome back to Smitty's Learning Room. Today we're going to continue having a look at the types of training and more specifically looking at flexibility training. Now when we have a look at the syllabus, this comes under the focus question, how does training affect performance? And we come down to types of training and training methods, and we're having a look at anaerobic training. So for example, anaerobic interval training. So again, we continue to look at the focus question from Core 2, how does training affect performance? And back down here to the types of training and training methods. Now we've already looked at aerobic training and anaerobic training, and now we're going to have a look at flexibility training. So for example, static stretching, ballistic stretching, PNF, and dynamic stretching. So we know that there are 4 different types of training. We have aerobic training, which we learned about in the video before, anaerobic training, which is what we're going to have a look at today, and then there's also flexibility training and strength training. So we know that there are 4 types of training: aerobic, anaerobic, flexibility, and strength. This video will explore how flexibility can improve performance. Flexibility is an important part of all physical activity and everyday living. Improved flexibility has been shown to reduce the chances of injury and increase the movement performance in relation to increased force, an increased range of motion, increased flexibility, and increased aesthetics for sports such as gymnastics or diving. And flexibility is generally trained through one of or a combination of static stretching, ballistic stretching, dynamic stretching, or proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, otherwise known as PNF stretching. Let's start by having a look at static stretching, which is the most commonly used form of stretching. And basically it requires an athlete to stretch a muscle in a static form to a point and hold for at least 15 to 30 seconds. The reason this is the most commonly used form of stretching is because it's effective and it's obviously very safe, particularly for young athletes or athletes that are new to the sport. The second type of stretching, ballistic stretching, involves the use of bouncing movements at the end of the range of motion to enhance the extent of the stretch. Because this allows for movement, there's an increased potential for injury due to less control over the body during this stretching. And this type of stretching is used by athletes with extreme flexibility needs. So for example, hurdlers or gymnasts. When we look at dynamic stretching, we look at the fact that it's very much something that's a progressive movement through the full range of motion. And it's become quite popular, especially in team sports, because athletes can actually prepare their body for the types of movements that they're going to experience throughout the game or throughout their performance by engaging in dynamic stretching, because it allows for these sport-specific movements. So for example, rotating arms at the shoulder joints for a swimmer. Examples of these dynamic stretches that you see common are things like butt kicks or high knees, or when we swing our legs at our hip joint to allow for increased flexibility, but also give our body some indication of what sort of movements are going to be needed in the coming game. The final type of stretching is proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, PNF stretching. Now, PNF stretching is a 3-stage process, and it starts by doing a static stretch, followed by an isometric contraction, and then followed again by the static stretch. Now, remember, our isometric contraction is where the muscle, there's just force applied and there's actually no lengthening or shortening of the muscle. So, for example, we really need to make sure that the isometric contraction occurs with assistance so that there's no injury, or so that contraction is controlled. So you'll see here in the picture that we start here by a passive hamstring stretch, and then the assistance pushes against the leg to allow for that isometric contraction to occur, and then goes back by relaxing to a passive stretch. Now this, when assistance is used, is a safe and effective way for increasing flexibilities and the body's capacity to stretch. And research has shown that by doing PNF stretching, athletes can actually enhance their movement by using this technique. This is something that's used regularly in yoga sessions or for athletes perhaps that are rehabilitating or returning to play to try and increase their movement of a muscle, leg or joint. So when we look at flexibility training as a whole, we know that it decreases our chances of injury, and we also know that it has huge impact on our movement performance. Now, depending on the level of athlete and the level of skill will depend on what type of flexibility training they will integrate into their program. Elite athletes will probably have decreased amounts of static stretching in their training and will probably be more focused on dynamic and PNF stretching because of the high level of sport that they're participating in, whereas if static and ballistic stretching would be for athletes of less ability or just for everyday movement and flexibility.